I'm honored to have back with me someone who's a very dear friend and someone who's an incredible freedom fighter and someone who has sounded the alarm bells as it relates to your financial and economic well-being and freedom for years. And if you've listened to him, you've benefited greatly. Rob Kirby was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He received his post-secondary education at the Great York University in economics in Toronto. When Rob finished his degree, he went to work in the financial district in Toronto called Bay Street, which is the equivalent of Wall Street in the United States. He worked on an institutional trading desk, and he also worked for an international interdealer broker of financial exchange and interest rate products. Rob then started writing on economic issues and was involved in a number of entrepreneurial pursuits. He currently writes about the markets. He has written a book from a gold bug's point of view. I encourage you to go to his website, Kirby, K-I-R-B-Y, KirbyAnalytics.com. Rob Kirby, folks, is one of the best forensic financial analysts in the world. Well, Rob, welcome back to Operation Freedom.
Pleasure to be with you again, Dave, and Merry Christmas to you and all your listeners.
Well, and same to you, Rob. So, Rob, as you know, we're going through quite the goat rodeo down here in the United States as it relates to the election. And I want your take on, first of all, how you believe things are transpiring. But before we go to that, I want to play a brief clip from Joe Biden a couple weeks before the election, muttered the following statement. And I'll have Derek play it, and then we'll get your take. Derek, hit it.
Secondly, we're in a situation where we have put together, and you guys did it for our administration, the President Obama's administration before this. We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.
Rob, he told us what was coming.
Well, Dave, this has a very, very familiar ring to it, at least in my eyes. You see, because what we are experiencing currently is a Supreme Court that will not look at, they're very aware that there's overwhelming evidence of vote fraud, but they don't want to hear the case. You see, this is very reminiscent to me, Dave, when you go back into the double O's during the reign of George Bush, the moron, because under his administration, the CFTC opened an investigation into allegations of rigging of our capital markets, specifically as it pertains to the arresting or suppression of the price of gold and silver.
Sure.
And after doing at least 5 years of investigations, the CFTC reared their ugly heads and said that there was no evidence of market rigging. Basically, they passed on hearing the case. Has a familiar ring to it, doesn't it, Dave? Rampant, overwhelming fraud. And in the case of the suppression of the gold and silver price, this evidence was painstakingly gathered, collected, and presented by the likes of the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, run by principally by Bill Murphy and Chris Powell, some of whose disciples I know have been guests on your show, and I'm actually proud and wears a badge of honor that I too was a disciple of them, or am a disciple of them, over the years. But despite overwhelming evidence that our capital markets are a cesspool, the CFTC didn't want to hear, and lo and behold, we've found out nowadays, because there are ongoing prosecutions of the likes of J.P. Morgan and a collection of international banks who have indeed been convicted of doing just what the CFTC said that there was no evidence of, namely the rigging and corruption of our capital markets pertaining to precious metals prices and the suppression of their prices. So another thing that's very interesting and I think is very connected to all of this, Dave, is that you and I have spoken in the past during interviews of an event that occurred during W. Bush's administration where effectively the control of, or the ability for, let's just say, companies that might be engaged in such activities as rigging our financial markets can be granted waivers. where they don't have to actually be truthful in their reporting. And the control of this was handed from the president's office to the head of the intelligence community. And that was done in 2006 under the vestiges of George W. Bush, and it was first actually reported as an article that wasn't really pushed or promoted much, and it was Newsweek magazine and the journalist who did the initial reporting on it, her name was Dawn Kopecki. And this is something you and I have talked about before. I would have it, Dave, that what the deep state is so absolutely scared of, and why they want Trump out, because, we've had the likes of Brennan say that he has to be removed using the 25th Amendment before, Biden could be inaugurated in January. They want Trump gone now. Why? Because Trump has taken the gloves off, I believe, finally. I believe that they're scared out of their minds in the deep state that Trump, if he gets wind of or understands the import of this executive order passed by W back in 2006, giving control of the financial reins of power to the intelligence community, if Trump becomes aware that this indeed was the case, because I think it's been kept from him, the import of this order, it has to be repealed. And if Trump gains knowledge of the importance of that, I truly believe that he will repeal it, and that would be a nail in the coffin of the deep state, I believe. Just as I do believe that ultimately, I do believe there's going to be a military resolution to our current issues regarding your election, and I think that comes. I think Trump waits, and I do believe it comes after Ratcliffe issues his report, which I do believe will implicate foreign actors as being directly involved in rigging your past election, federal election. So this is what I think is on the plate, and all I can say, Dave, it has a really, really, really familiar ring to it.
It really does, Rob, and it's interesting, the parallel you drew there, because when you and Bill Murphy and Chris Powell and a number of other people had the courage to step up and speak about this, the financial goat rodeo that was occurring as far as the fraud behind the curtain, you were demonized. You were threatened. You were pummeled. You were defamed, slandered, libeled.
Steve, exactly the same way people who say that the votes were rigged.
Right. Yes. Yes.
We were shamed.
And the reaction to the truth tellers. I want to play this clip. This is at a Michigan hearing, and this is going to ring very true to you, Rob. And again, I think enhance the parallel as well, because this Patriot was these pontificators, bureaucrats. Well, if this is so rampant, this fraud, why aren't there more people speaking about it? Well, wait a minute. We got 5,000 people under sworn affidavits that Rudy has that was presented that documented criminal activity across the country. 5,000 people, not like 5,000. Yet these ignorant bureaucrats that are essentially bought and paid for by the syndicate of your choice, they're saying, why aren't there more people coming forward? And a patriot stepped forward and said, let me tell you why. Derek, play that clip for Rob.
Representative Camilleri is asking perhaps why is it that more people, and I know we have a couple here today, but why is it that we're not having more people come forward? I mean, it seems like if there was all this widespread fraud that, we'd have dozens and dozens of people.
I'll tell you why. Mm-hmm. My life has been destroyed. My life has been completely destroyed because of this. I've lost family. I've lost friends. I've been threatened. My kids have been threatened. I've had to move. I've had to change my phone number. I've had to get rid of social media. Nobody wants to come forward. They're getting threatened. Their lives are getting ruined. I can't even get an actual job anymore. I can't. Because Democrats like to ruin your lives. That's why.
All right. Let's...
Just like they do to Trump.
Sound familiar, Rob?
Oh, sounds very familiar to me, Dave. And the kind of rhetoric we hear when we talk about precious metals prices having been severely depressed or suppressed. People say, well, but gold's gone up over the last 10, 15 years. It's gone from $300 to $1,800 or $1,900, wherever it is currently. And they make it sound like you must be mistaken to say that the price has been suppressed. It's gone up. Yeah, the price has gone up, but the price hasn't reacted nearly the way it should, Dave. That's the thing. You see, historically, gold and silver were the go-to instruments in the financial universe in the wake of monetary debasement, which we've had in spades, coming out of basically the deep state-centric U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. Too much money creation, and how that has been greeted historically is a rise in the price of gold and silver, which we have seen, but to a dramatically lesser extent than it should have been. And case in point, I want to make here. I have stated on your show, Dave, many times that I believe I'm a huge believer in the anti-dollar trades, which include gold and silver, especially if you buy it in physical form, and in cryptocurrencies, which have become basically a Johnny-come-lately alternative, dollar alternative. Only because blockchain technology allegedly means that you cannot sell a Bitcoin or a piece of cryptocurrency that's utilizing blockchain. You can't sell it more than once. Okay? And let's just say, Dave, that on Friday, when I went to bed, before the Supreme Court, or just as the Supreme Court was announcing their decision that they weren't going to hear the Texas case, we saw the price of Bitcoin react, okay, on the back of that geopolitical event. Friday evening, the price of Bitcoin was $17,900. Currently, we're at $19,200. The price of Bitcoin has reacted by $1,300, and I would suggest to your listeners, primarily because of that geopolitical event that occurred on Friday night. And mark my words, when gold opens in another half hour or hour, I believe it's 6 o'clock Eastern time, we'll start seeing a live price of gold as it's trading in foreign markets. And dollars to donuts, Dave, the price will be no change or very, very little change. You see, and that's because gold and silver have been administered a date rape drug by the COMEX and the LBMA, and they can't act as they normally would. Just as somebody who's date raped can't get up, it isn't necessarily going to get up and run to the authorities to explain what happened to them, because they can't even figure out what happened to them. And you know what? I'll just tell you something, Dave, and all your listeners. The Gold Antitrust Action Committee knows exactly what's occurred in the precious metals arena. They have documented it over and over and over and over again to authorities. And the authorities in America in particular have taken the viewpoint that basically the same viewpoint that the Supreme Court just did with regards to election rigging. They took a pass, and they just let it float. And do you know why, Dave? Ultimately, do you know who's behind the suppression of metals? It's the same actors that are behind rigging of your election. It's the deep state. And you know what? I know and I have hope that Trump is onto this, because it is Trump's DOD who has just signaled that they're going to stop funding the CIA. And that begins Jan 1.
It's huge.
They've had enough. They've had enough. Trump has had enough. And he's taken the gloves off, and all I can wish for him is Godspeed. because the world needs Donald Trump right now. I don't agree with everything Trump does, and I don't want anyone telling me I worship the ground he walks on, but Trump is an enemy of the deep state, and the deep state is indeed the biggest enemy of humanity that humanity has ever faced.
Folks, we're speaking with Rob Kirby, Kirby, Analytics.com. So, Rob, you mentioned earlier in our time today that you felt that with Radcliffe introducing his results through the executive order, which are due by Friday but can come before that, you believe there might be some military intervention afterwards.
I believe, Dave, the Insurrection Act will be invoked, and I do believe that there will be roundups of traitors to your country. And you know what? I welcome that, Dave, as a Canadian, because we have our own issues up here in Canada. We have a prime minister in Canada currently who might as well be waving the Chinese flag. The man is a complete and utter disgrace and an insult to our country. And you see, Dave, in my world, I believe patriots are great neighbors. I believe that patriots are the best neighbors anybody could ever have. And I welcome patriots and wish them all success in defeating the deep state, because the deep state is the enemy of everybody, Dave.
And with these, the scenario you have rightfully and I believe accurately pointed out, do we see the release then of the gold and silver price? As
ultimately, Dave, out? Yes, because when the deep state is put down, I believe that Trump will be successful. We will see the anti-dollar trades blossom in their full glory, I believe. And I do believe that gold and silver have a great deal of catch-up to do. And I also believe, Dave, that the cryptocurrencies will continue to elevate their prices in nominal terms. But, Dave, this is going to be more than anything a reflection of monetary debasement, because the amount of money that's been printed since COVID reared its head, the amount of money that's been created, admittedly created, we have double and triple and quadruple multiples of what's been created needs to be created going forward if the charade of the dollar is to continue, and the deep state knows that, which is why they want a puppet in control of your country, and more than anything, Dave, they want a puppet in control of the monetary apparatus in your country with the money that's going to be created because it must. So the anti-dollar trades, the cryptos, gold and silver, will continue to do well. And as I've been stating now for at least 9 months, that the run-up in the anti-dollar instruments will be crypto-led. Only because the deep state does not have the ability to suppress cryptos the way they do precious metal. The COMEX and the LBMA are crime scenes. And there is not the equivalent means to or venues to suppress cryptos that there is in precious metal. And physical precious metals will shine, just as cryptos will continue to going forward.
And Rob, the deep state has shown their hand a bit. You know, one of their banking, all the banks are associated with them, but their prime banking puppet is J.P. Morgan Chase. They've accumulated huge amounts of physical gold and silver. And are they showing their hand that, well, Trump gets this thing in hand and the price of gold and silver are released? They're covering their bets on that angle too, aren't they?
Of course, but listen, the communist Chinese government is the biggest buyer of physical precious metal on the planet, bar none. Okay, they make the amount of physical precious metal that J.P. Morgan has bought look small. So you see, they're covering their bases too.
Rob, how can folks follow you? They need to follow you on a daily basis.
You can catch me on the web at kirbyanalytics.com, and you can also find me, on fine platforms like yours, Steve.
Rob, I'd like to thank you for everything you have done, are doing, and will do.